Moscow hosts Iran, Turkiye, and Syria. More details to come. Quadrilateral meeting on Syria to be held in Moscow on 15-16 March. A meeting on Syria at the level of deputy foreign ministers between Turkey, Russia, Iran, and Syria will be held in Russia's capital on 15-16 March, Turkish diplomat sources said on Monday, Anadolu news agency reports. The meeting will be attended by Turkish Deputy Foreign Minister Burak Akapar, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov, their Syrian counterpart Ayman Suzan, and Ali Asghar Kaji, a senior advisor to Iran's foreign minister. Last week, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu announced that a Turkish delegation will visit Moscow for technical talks ahead of a planned Turkish, Russian, Iranian, and Syrian foreign ministers meeting. The Iranian side will also attend this meeting. At this meeting's preparations for the ministers' meeting will be held. Cavusoglu said at a joint news conference with his Iranian counterpart, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, in the capital, Ankara. On 28 December 2022, the Turkish, Russian, and Syrian defense ministers met in Moscow to discuss counterterrorism efforts in Syria and agreed to continue the tripartite meetings to ensure stability in Syria and the wider region. About the possibility of the inclusion of Iran into the talks, Turkey previously said Ankara would be pleased if Iran's involved in the process. Although no date or location has yet been announced, the foreign ministers' meeting would mark another high-level talk since the Syrian civil war began in 2011. And also from Memo, Syrian President Assad arrives in Moscow, will meet Putin. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad arrived in Moscow on Tuesday on his first official visit outside the Middle East since last month's devastating earthquake, according to a statement from the Syrian presidency via the Telegram messaging app Reuters reports. Assad will hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin during his visit, alongside a large Syrian ministerial delegation, the statement said. A Kremlin statement said the two leaders would discuss cooperation in the political, trade, and humanitarian spheres, as well as prospects for an overall settlement of the situation in and around Syria. Russia launched a military campaign in Syria in 2015 that helped to turn the tide in the civil war in favor of Assad, with massive aerial bombardment of opposition-held areas. It helped Assad to regain much of the territory he lost to rebels who sought to topple him. Moscow has since expanded its military facilities in the country with the permanent air base in Maymim in Syria's Latakia province. Russia's naval base in the Mediterranean coastal city of Tartus is the Russian Navy's only permanent warm water post outside the former Soviet Union. Western intelligence says Russia's costly war in Ukraine has forced it to push some assets from Syria, although the country remains Moscow's firmest foothold on the southern flank of NATO. The visit coincides with the 12th anniversary of the uprising in Syria that began with peaceful demonstrations in March 2011. The protest turned into an armed revolt after Assad used force to crush the opposition. It spiraled into a multi-sided conflict, which has sucked in neighbors and world powers and caused the largest displacement crisis since World War II. And from FGN, Russia talks between Putin and Syrian president today. Economic humanitarian cooperation will be discussed on many issues. Russian president to hold talks with Syrian counterpart. Russian President Vladimir Putin will hold talks with his Syrian counterpart, Bashar Assad, in Moscow on Wednesday. Current issues of Russian-Syrian political, trade, economic, humanitarian cooperation, and development will be discussed for a comprehensive solution for the situation in Syria and in its surroundings. According to Russian media TASS, Putin and Assad last met in September 2021 when the Syrian president visited Moscow. Assad has visited Moscow several times for talks with Russian counterpart. Previous talks between the two countries were held in May 2018. Previous talks between the two countries were held in May 2018, October 2015, and November 2017. Moreover, the presidents of the two countries had a meeting in November 2020 and spoke on the phone in early February this year. The president of Russia visited Syria twice. Putin's visited Syria twice in recent years, in December 2017 and January 2020, to meet with Assad. According to media reports, Assad arrived in Moscow on Tuesday on an official visit. A large delegation of ministers came with him. From Rudaw.net, Syria's Assad to meet ally Putin in Moscow. Syrian President Bashar Assad is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday in Moscow ahead of a quadripartite meeting of the deputy foreign ministers of Turkey, Russia, and Syria with an Iranian senior advisor. The Kremlin confirmed that Putin will meet Assad on Wednesday on the 12th anniversary of the Syrian war in a statement via Russian state news agency TASS. Both leaders are expected to talk further development of Russian-Syrian cooperation in the political, trade, economic, and humanitarian spheres, as well as the prospects for a comprehensive settlement of the situation in and around Syria, per the statement from Kremlin. The meeting comes ahead of an anticipated meeting of the deputy foreign affairs ministers of both countries with Turkey and Iran to discuss counterterrorism efforts in Syria. The meeting was initially to be tripartite, but Iran was added to the discussion after expressing the country's desire to be part of the conversation. Received by Mikhail Bogdanov, Russia's deputy foreign minister and Putin's special representative in the Middle East, Assad landed in Moscow, along with a delegation from his ministerial cabinet, reported the Syrian state media. The trip marks Assad's first official trip outside the Middle East since the devastating earthquake that shook Syria on February 6 that killed more than 6,000 people in the war-afflicted country. Russia's been Assad's strongest ally throughout the war that initially began as an uprising turned into a brutal civil war. Over 12 years of conflict in Syria resulted in destruction across the country. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed, injured, displaced as a result of the brutalities, and over 500,000 people have been killed in the conflicts, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, and displaced more than half of the country's pre-war population. Al-Assad's visit to Moscow, a drive for normalization with Ankara. This is English Abaladi. Concessions to get aid. Following the announcement of al-Assad's visit to Moscow, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu revealed that a four-way meeting at the level of deputy foreign ministers will be held in Moscow next week with the participation of the Syrian regime, Turkey, Russia, Iran. The failure of the Syrian regime and the Kremlin to comment on the reasons for al-Assad's visit to Russia opened the door to questions about the importance of the visit and the issues that will be discussed during al-Assad's presence in Moscow. The upcoming visit to Moscow is the fifth of its kind after the outbreak of the protest in Syria, and it's the first visit that was announced before it happened. Three files rapprochement is the most important. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that al-Assad plans to visit Russia, indicating that the date of the visit will be announced at a specific time for security reasons, according to what was reported by the Russian Novosti agency on March 6. Peskov's remarks came hours after a comment reported by the Russian newspaper Vedomosti from a source close to the Russian president's administration, stating that al-Assad will arrive on official visit to Moscow in mid-March and may be received by Putin. And Kremlin didn't comment on the reasons for al-Assad's visit to Moscow, while the newspaper quoted Russian experts as saying that humanitarian issues and international relations will be on the agenda of the visit. From Erdo Point, Damascus eyeing participation in talks with Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Moscow. Damascus is exploring a possibility of the deputy foreign ministers of Iran, Turkey, Russia, and Syria scheduled for March 15th in Moscow. Syrian Assistant Foreign Minister of Affairs and Expatriates Ayman Suzan told Sputnik on Tuesday. And from Tasnim, Russia, Iran, Syria, Turkey to hold deputy foreign minister meeting in Moscow. The deputy foreign ministers of Russia, Iran, Syria, and Turkey are set to meet in Moscow on March 15th and 16th as part of efforts to normalize the relations between Ankara and Damascus. Earlier, Russia's special presidential envoy for the Middle East and Africa, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov, told TASS that preparations for a four-party meeting were ongoing. Citing Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, the Turkish state-run TRT TV channel reported that Monday that Moscow will host technical talks involving the four countries to discuss preparations for a meeting of their foreign ministers. The upcoming meeting follow consultations between the defense ministers of Russia, Syria, and Turkey in December 2022 aimed at normalizing the relations between Ankara and Damascus. The participants of the meeting agreed to create a trilateral commission. The top diplomats of the three countries are expected to hold a meeting to discuss the possibility of talks between President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey and Bashar al-Assad of Syria. Erdogan previously suggested that Russian President Vladimir Putin host a trilateral meeting involving Assad, preceded by a meeting between officials from intelligence agencies, defense, and foreign ministers. And from Daily Sabah, Turkish delegation set to hold talks with Syrian officials in Moscow. Russia will host a four-way meeting on Wednesday and Thursday between Turkiye, the Syrian regime, and Iran, diplomatic sources speaking to Turkish media outlets announced on Monday. Turkey's Deputy Foreign Minister Barak Akapar will lead the Turkish delegation for 2 days to normalize relations between Turkiye and the Syrian regime. Mikhail Bogdanov, Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, who also serves as Putin's special representative for the Middle East, will represent the Kremlin. Ali Asghar Kaji, political affairs advisor to the Iranian foreign minister, will represent Tehran. Ayman Suzan, deputy foreign minister of the Assad regime, will also participate in the talks. Last week, Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu announced that a Turkish delegation would visit Moscow for technical talks ahead of a planned Turkish, Russian, Iranian, and Syrian foreign ministers meeting. The Iranian side will also attend this meeting. At this meeting, preparations for the foreign ministers' meeting will be made, Cavusoglu said at a joint news conference with his Iranian counterpart Hossein Amir Abdollahian in the capital, Ankara. On December 28, 2022, the Turkish, Russian, and Syrian defense ministers met in Moscow to discuss counterterrorism efforts in Syria. They agreed to continue the tripartite meetings to ensure stability in Syria and the wider region. About the possibility of the inclusion of Iran into the talks, Turkey had previously said Ankara would be pleased if Iran is involved in this process. Although no date or location has been announced, the foreign ministers' meeting would mark another high-level talk since the Syrian civil war began in 2011. And from GulfNews.com, Assad visits Moscow as Putin pushes Syria-Turkey reconciliation. Moscow President Syrian President Bashar al-Assad on Wednesday will meet with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Moscow as the Kremlin steps up efforts to restore ties between Turkey and Syria. The Russian capital on the same day will also host four-way talks involving Turkey, Syria, and Iran. The diplomatic activity comes days after top U.S. military officials visited American troops and their Kurdish allies in northeastern Syria, where Washington has kept a presence for almost 8 years. The diplomatic push opposed by the U.S. comes after China brokered a diplomatic détente between Iran and U.S. ally Saudi Arabia, demonstrating its newfound weight in the region. The U.S. has about 900 troops in Syria, a presence that Moscow and Damascus have long sought to end. The U.S. reputation in the region would be undermined even more if the Americans tried to impede regional efforts to stabilize Syria and push the Kurdish agenda, said Nikolai Surkov, a Middle East analyst on the Moscow-based Institute of World Economy and International Relations. Other regional states are likely to follow the example of Turkey. The inclusion of Iran in the talks at the level of deputy foreign minister came after Turkiye indicated it didn't oppose Tehran's participation. The two-day meeting Wednesday and Thursday is intended to prepare the ground for consultations between the four countries' top diplomats. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu has said Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he's willing to sit down with Assad to promote peace in the region. The Syrian leader, who arrived in Russia late Tuesday, will meet Putin to discuss political and economic cooperation, the Kremlin said. The rapprochement between Syria and Turkey, which has backed rebels fighting in Assad in war that started in 2011, has been pushed for by Damascus's major military backer, Russia. Syria remains under strict Western sanctions and is suspended from the Arab League, making it dependent on Iran, which also set fighters to back Assad in the conflict. And more news in a moment.